give yourself a death date, assign what that is. You don't need to necessarily tell anybody, but have it pretty clear in your head that that's the day or that's the year that you're not going to live beyond. Now, you can change that year every few years, but for me, it's always been about 10 years away, because that means I don't lose sight. I don't sort of leave that bucket list of things to do for another day. I keep on taking them and doing parts of them. I'm still working towards a future. And to me, that's quite while it does make some difficulties. Telling your wife that you might only live for another 10 years and let's have kids is pretty challenging. It does actually empower you to then make the most of what you've got and work for something for them in the future.
Our featured speaker today is the founder of Viridis and co-founder of Helios Solutions and LAROS Technologies. He's also played a pivotal role in shaping non-profit organisations such as Australian Passive House Association and Common Ground Queensland. Jonathan, it's a great pleasure to have you as our featured guest today. Thanks so much for being willing to share your journey with us.
I've come here to talk about the other side. It's been to run an organisation. Like all of you, I went along to boot camp and was very impressed by everything I learnt there. And that really showed me how to get things started. But I guess, how do you actually keep it going? What are some of the challenges you can face? You learnt that entrepreneurs need to have the spirit of a pirate and the execution skills of a Navy SEAL. But I guess what I feel is being missing from that is you need to have the mental fortitude of an astronaut, because it is bloody tough to do these things. Look, you might be able to start up, Facebook or something like that and be instantly rich, but for many other people, it's a much tougher journey. So while we're all pretty good at the 24 steps that help us work out how to define our niche and how we're going to become profitable out of it, what I think we really need to look at, or what I find we need to look at so that I can keep on going day after day, how to basically set yourself up with a bit of a never say die attitude. I certainly recognize and keep hearing the words, you need to fail fast, and that's important, but you can't give up. You've got to find a way to keep on going if what you're doing is important to you. What I'll be doing today is just sharing some war stories, sharing some of the troubles that I've faced. Some of them were from before boot camp, some of them were from afterwards. And my goal from doing this is to give everybody a chance to laugh at some of the mistakes I've made and how stupid I was to have done them. And then hopefully that means you're not going to make them yourselves. Because look, I have been knocked down quite a few times, and it is an effort sometimes to get back up. But the other thing I guess I want to warn everybody is that the lesson I learned when we had kids is that the more different opinions there are about how to do something, the less it actually matters what you do. So I'm just sharing with you what worked for me. You're welcome to try it, and I hope it gives you some benefit, or at least you can rule it out so you don't go make those mistakes. The very first point to talk about, I guess, my approach to life. When I was 15, I was not able to walk. I was trying to play football and things, and basically got to a point where I'd just be knocked and I'd be sort of on the ground crying in pain. And I had doctors for a year telling me this was all growing pains, until one day I got the best news ever. They told me I had cancer, and my parents were absolutely devastated. But for me, this was sort of finally some truth. The doctors had been wrong. It wasn't just growing pains. But what they also then said is that basically everyone who had had this cancer before me had died, except for one other person who had had his leg amputated. And as a 15-year-old kid, I wasn't too keen for either of those options. Now, I've come out of this pretty well. I've been able to, live a lot longer than that. But what it did is change the attitude from when you're a kid, you sort of think you're going to live forever. And what you mean by forever when you're a kid is you're going to live to old age. And I see a lot of my colleagues out there still living like they're going to live to an old age. And I've seen too many people not actually make it there. And they actually never get to retire. They never get to enjoy all the efforts they've put in. So I've also seen a range of people live for the moment. So live fast, die young, which is an awful lot of fun. But at the same time, it means you might not actually get all the benefits and all the enjoyment out of life you could if you'd actually had a bit more of a structure to it. What I try and look for is a way to live forever, but also to enjoy the now. So you've got to find a way to balance those two things. So the approach I adopted when I was 15, without even realizing it, is I basically set myself a 10-year horizon. I knew when I was 15 I had cancer. but it was a slow growing cancer. I should get 10 more years. So I started living with that perspective. And that certainly made it hard when I met my wife and said, hey, I've got 10 years left, let's have kids and get married. But it's given us a way to make sure that we're not just living for a future. But when they've got 10 years ahead of you, you still actually want to plan and make sure that it's as good as possible. So it's still worth investing in things and investing in relationships, investing in whatever else you need. One of the other struggles I face sometimes is just the perception versus reality of running a business. So many people expect, and this is both friends and family, expect that if you're running a business, well, you must be rolling in it and you spend your day sitting back, drinking coffee, having a great time. The reality of it, from what I can see, or at least what I've experienced, is it's far more like climbing a mountain. Maybe not quite what these school kids face trying to go home from school, where they're basically climbing up a rickety bamboo ladder. But success in business is hard work. You do have to struggle and put the effort in, and it's a long journey up. You just have to continually keep on going. And there are certainly benefits for it. Like when you're climbing this mountain, you can see the views and enjoy the scenery, but it is an effort. You do need to keep going. But at the same time with that, when things go wrong, they go wrong very, very quickly. And you can find yourself where everything you'd think was going to happen within a matter of sort of 2 or 3 months can be the complete opposite. And then you've got to work, you're down at the bottom of the cliff again, and you've got to work out how you're going to climb that mountain again. You need to find a way to, I guess, have the mental stamina to keep on going and deciding if this is a mountain you actually do want to climb, and being prepared to sometimes say no, but you need to climb a different mountain. But equally, if you are going to do it, what are you actually going to make work for you? The other attitude I see out there is a little bit like with cancer. So many people say, oh, it won't happen to me. And people sometimes have a similar sort of attitude to business. I don't think I've met a business owner yet that have set themselves up to fail. And yet, when you actually speak to people running businesses or have run businesses, generally they've gone out of business within about 5 years. So what is it that people are doing wrong? And why would you be any different? So if you're going to be setting something up, what can you do to make sure that you're not one of the businesses that fail? And certainly that comes down to a good lot of education and knowledge and trying things and not being scared of taking a step. So I might, at this point, just talk about some of the things that I've encountered that, again, never really expected, but had to try and find a way through. One of the first things I had to face was the very sudden departure, so not death, but departure of a partner, where we'd set a business up and all of a sudden we'd call my business partner up to our Brisbane office to talk about actually acquiring another part of the business. And we'd spent a whole day with this other organisation and basically got to a point where we'd agreed that, we were going to go ahead. Didn't sign the paperwork then, but shook hands, walked away. And my business partner said, oh, by the way, I'm resigning. Thank you very much. See you later. That can be pretty challenging when you don't see it coming. And I'll actually talk more about business partnerships later on. Other areas where we've gone into trouble is when we've had bankruptcy of significant clients. So when you have a client that's providing more than 30% of your income and they don't pay you after you've done a significant amount of work for them, that can be a pretty significant problem. Next one we solved or we had to work through was where the market completely shifted on us. We had a fantastic business doing some really good, profitable work. And within the space of about probably 2 years, the market shifted completely. And while we knew the market was shifting a little bit, we hadn't anticipated that it was a complete turnaround. And basically our entire business disappeared in 2 years. And the other thing we had to face going through all of this was we've had our office completely flooded when we had the Brisbane floods. So we didn't actually have a premises to operate. We've gone through bushfires. So for people that weren't in Australia, we had a 3-month period where there were bushfires right the way along the east coast of Australia. And like everybody else around the world, we've had COVID to deal with and had to work out how to actually make that work. So there are each of these presented a different challenge for us to try and find a way to get through. And the best thing I can suggest here is always have a backup plan or a safety chute. Now you've got to work out what that backup plan or safety chute may be for you. It might be as simple as your parents can bail you out. Or it might be you've got a pretty incredible partner that can provide the secure income for you, or you might have a side hustle. So if one thing goes down, you've got something else to work on. For us, and one of the key parts of our business was to always make sure we had 3 months worth of financial reserves in the business at any moment in time, so that at least if something did happen and the market did start to shift, we had a chance to do something and keep on getting through. We operate a professional services consultancy. our staff are our assets. So we need to find a way to make sure they get employed or they can maintain their employment even as we go through difficult periods. While a 3-month turnover sounds like a pretty reasonable amount, it can actually be quite hard to do sometimes. And it certainly means you don't always take the cash home for yourself. But the other advantage of having that sort of cash reserves in an organization, and ideally a bit more than that, is that when opportunities come up, you've actually got the cash to take advantage of them. So when the market changes and other people start failing, you can actually make the most of those situations. This was probably the toughest lesson for me, was my first business partner, because I'd started up a business, and the whole reason I'd started Viridis was so that my wife could go and have her career and I could be basically earning a little bit of money and looking after the kids, our new kids at the same time. And that was a fantastic plan, except we got far too busy within about 3 months. And all of a sudden I was working 70-hour weeks and my wife was having to look at what she would have to do to enable my business. So I enticed somebody else to join me, somebody that I knew from the industry, knew reasonably well, and said, look, here's a third of the company, let's get going. And that was pretty successful for a while until it wasn't. I mean, we grew it to 15 people within a year. We were doing some fantastic work and really get a name for the industry. And because we're both in sustainability industry, I'd assumed that he was a fairly ethical and responsible person. And I'd assumed that he had, I guess, a very similar sort of mentality to myself. And I thought what would be important to me must be the same as what's important for him. This is where I just start giving a couple of warnings. I trusted my business partner as much as I trusted my wife. Well, like I trust my wife, because in some ways you have to. You're facing difficult things. You can't both be involved in every little detail. And I thought, well, we're equal. We will do things and always do the right thing by the people. So a couple of things to be considering. And this is the message that I really didn't get to begin with, is when it comes time to depart, you may not be on equal footings. What I mean by that, now the example that I can share for that one is I've been working with my business partner for about 7 years. He said he was going to resign, and I'd basically given him the managing director role. So he was running the company and I was doing the technical side of things. And I'd abdicated from my responsibilities on the financial side and hadn't been keeping track of it. He'd found himself a $200,000 a year job to move on to. And he said, look, I'm out of here. By the way, 4 staff have just resigned. You've got 7 staff still operating. You've got no money coming in, and you've got a tax debt that you need to be paying a whole lot of money from now for the next 2 years, probably to get through it all. I was pretty floored to find that, and then discovered that, then I also knew that we'd actually entered into a whole lot of new contracts, like a new 5-year lease for some large office space down in Canberra, and we'd entered into some pretty massive contracts for our IT side of things. So overall, we had about $400,000 or $500,000 worth of commitments to fulfill in the next 2 years, and very little income coming in. I was also very conscious that we had a number of staff we need to look after, and it was at the moment the economic times were not sufficient for people to easily go and get other work. We'd had a bit of a market shift. There really wasn't the demand for our services. So I didn't feel like I had much an option. My business partner had a $200,000 a year job to move on to, and I had staff I was responsible for, debts to pay, and didn't feel I'd actually be able to get any other work anyway. So when you're going into contracts, consider what your exit clauses are going to be. Work out how you're going to actually fulfill these things and what is going to be fair. So consider what the impact of somebody leaving on the business could be. I certainly won't be giving away shareholding again. You need to make sure it's actually earned rather than used as an enticement on board. So certainly you can say, yes, if you come on board, you'll be able to earn this much, but I still have to put the effort in to get there. Everything I do now, if we ever need a guarantor on a lease on anything, I'll make sure that all shareholders or all directors are listed as a guarantor, so it's not all left on one person's shoulder. I'll also be checking out and trying to sound out what their ideology was, because for me, I was not prepared to just abandon staff that had relied on us for 7 years and say, I'm sorry, you need to go and find your own way forward now. So while I had to work for a year and a half without any income, my staff were able to keep on going and either find their own work or stay with the business and keep earning money. So for me, the ideology of my business partner is important. And as I mentioned earlier, Make sure you've got your exit clauses written down and consider what the impact will be. If one of your business partners leaves and you're a professional consulting service, that could actually change your offer to the market. The other thing to consider is that the grass is always greener. You're always going to be at a point, or not always, but you're often going to be at a point where you think, well, if only I did this, if only I just got a standard consulting job, I could earn more money, or if I could only do this. At some point, you're going to feel trapped. You might not be being sent to jail, I hope, but you're going to feel like, well, this is just too hard. You can't get out and have holidays. You can't close because it'll have an impact on your own reputation, on your staff. You can't necessarily get another job while you've got staff. So as an employee, it's really easy to go and find another job. When you're actually running a business, your opportunities to look for something else until you've made a decision about what you're doing in the business is very, very limited. So you need to make sure that you keep a hold of why you're actually running your business. So at least for myself, I need to articulate what is the objective that I'm trying to get from the business. So this is not the business objectives, but my objective from the business. I'd also suggest you challenge and refine conventional wisdom. And it is important to go for the niche because the niche is the way to make some money. But the issue we've had with this is when the market shifts and people don't want that niche anymore. So the way we run our business now is to actually have multiple niches. So I've now got an offering that where everything is related but quite different. So I've got a consulting service and a laboratory and an area that does investigations. And they're all use people's similar skills, so I can have a team that move from one area to another, but it allows us to adapt and weave to suit the different market cycles that the restoration industry faces compared to the construction industry compared to other parts. While that does mean I'm effectively running 4 businesses within one, it does give me much stronger resilience. And there is a cost to that. I do lose profit, but when things happen, I've got an ability to keep on keeping on. The other thing to remember is it can be lonely being the boss. And I had a staff member once whose wife nearly died in a car accident, and we did everything we could to help him and his wife get through. That same person then nearly lost their baby. They had a pretty terrible life, a pretty terrible series of events, and we were there looking after them the whole way through. Even though they weren't a good fit for the business, it was a friend and someone that was worth looking after. I hadn't realized that it was very much a one-way friendship, and while I was offering these things and was very happy to take them, I hadn't realized that if I ever needed help, that it wouldn't come in return. So you do need to be very clear that when you are the boss, yes, sometimes people will isolate you, but B, people could actually, lean on that friendship and hope for things from you that won't necessarily come in return. So you need to find other ways to get that network and that community of people around you. So for me, I have my work and my family. I don't have too much beyond that, but my family and my work is everything to me. So I've got that level of support for myself. The other thing I find is worth always considering is that others pay a price for me to run my business. And the person that runs, so the sort of price I'm talking about here is when things aren't going well, you can't just stop and take a holiday. So your family miss out on those holidays. But the other part to this is, particularly for my wife, I'd set the business up so that she could go and have the career. And the reality is my business has been a dead weight around her because she's had to be the one that always provides the solid, stable income. She's the one that makes sure that the family can keep on going regardless of whether my business is doing fantastically or trying to get out of a $500,000 hole. So once you've made that recognition, you then need to find a way to really value and appreciate that and to return it. So I don't spend my time going off for a game of golf. I'm there with my wife, with my family, because that's really the only thing I can offer back to them. For those of you that are in the non-profit or the profit for purpose area, this is a warning I'd suggest is that your strength can actually be your weakness. I get a lot of power and strength from working in the sustainability field and helping achieve a greener, more sustainable world. And that is fantastic. But it is also an incredibly heavy burden to bear because deep down, I know that things aren't going well. There are some pretty difficult times ahead. And it almost doesn't matter what I do, we've got some problems ahead. And that sort of messaging can come through in so many other areas, whether you're working in homelessness or anything else. The problem is so big, it's going to take time to solve. So while that is a strength when you're running your business, when you start facing some challenges, I found that actually started to undermine everything and actually made me lose confidence and lose strength. So you need to be aware that these strengths can turn and become basically a drain and a sap on your energy. Now, the last part is, even if you are trying to run a profit for purpose or anything else, you do need to look at the money. Jerry Maguire might have had it right when he said, show me the money. You've got to find a way to bring the money in, partly for yourself, partly so that you can have something for your family and for others that have missed out on something. But really, it is just for making sure you have a strong, viable business. Because as long as you're making money, you can do things, you can invest in people, you can give them the training, you can be flexible when they need it, like when their partners have had an issue. And without money, everything stops. So do not lose sight of money. Make sure you keep on focusing where it is, keep your cash flow up. For me, we're just keeping the positive balance side all the time. Thank you. All right, back to you, Nancy.
Thank you so much for such a comprehensive, I don't even know what to say, summary of your victories as well as your lessons learned. I'm kind of in awe of what you've been through and the philosophy that you've developed along the way. And I really appreciate you sharing that with us. Hi there. If you're enjoying this podcast, would you mind leaving us a review, a like, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform? Thanks so much. That really helps our reach. The Founders Voyage podcast is now proudly sponsored by Viridis. Kane at Viridis has been taking care of our editing since early 2024. He works efficiently, and I'm sure you'll agree that he does a great job. Thank you to Viridis for helping bring this podcast to life. If you want the same great support we're getting for your podcast, or you need help with video, photography, or animation, you can get 10% off at vidops.io using our referral code Voyage. That's vidops.io, referral code Voyage. Now back to the show. I am kind of blown away at how much thought you've really put into, your personal why and the why of your businesses. And I appreciate, how much you value the people in your life that have helped you. As someone that also really, values people, I was wondering, how you came to find your co-founders, how you decided those first team members would come into being. And I know you kind of shared some pitfalls there as well, but do you have recommendations for entrepreneurs, looking for co-founders right now?
Try and test them more than anything. So you've really got to get to know them. My first business partner, I knew him from the industry, and I was just too quick to jump into bed with him. After that, we started the business LAROS Technologies, and that was more somebody that I'd been working alongside for a while and had sort of known him for several years, had a pretty good idea who he was. And then he brought on his business partner, I brought on mine, and sort of together we formed something. And that worked reasonably well because we were relying on that sort of mutual trust. But probably the best case I had is actually with Santi, who's on this call, whom I met at the 2018 boot camp.
I think that's a great deal of wisdom you just shared in that. One of the things that I'm personally very terrified of is making poor choices in regards to partners that I work with. And I think, as you say, testing them and taking the time to really evaluate is a very valuable sort of approach. Something I was hoping to, if you wouldn't mind just explaining a little bit more about your business, Viridis, and what you specifically do with it in the space.
Yeah, so Viridis started out as a sustainable consultancy. So we were helping architects and builders work out how their building could be more green. So with that, we were looking at ways for it to reduce its energy, to improve its indoor environment quality. That was quite a changing market when we started. 2005, we were right at the front of the wave, and that's been fantastic to be there. But by about 2010, not just everybody had caught up, but people were pretty sick and tired of hearing about these sustainable green buildings. So the market collapsed from underneath us. Thankfully, at the time, we'd been looking at how it wasn't just the impact these buildings had on the world, it was looking at how the impact the buildings have on people. So we spent a lot of time looking at, we wrote a paper called the IQ of IQ, about how the indoor environment quality would actually have an impact on a child's ability and speed that they could learn at. We only looked at the international research that was out there, but we found some massive correlations. That led us to develop indoor environment laboratory. So we actually go and test and see what's going on. And that's allowed us to then get into the market and help them work out what's going wrong in a building. How can we make these buildings better? What I hadn't realized from developing that is there's also then the whole restoration industry, and that after a building has been through some traumatic event, such as a flood, people look at how, if it's structurally safe to move back into, but they don't look at all the mold side of things. And we've had a number of rather substantial floods in Australia in the last 10 years. So we now have a mold laboratory where people send their samples in, and we can tell them if the mold is dangerous and a problem, and also if the place has been remediated to a level that's good enough for people to safely move back into it. So the next part of the business we're moving on to now is more on business resilience. So we've got all these other parts where we've got people who've got different skill sets. So we're now looking at ways to bring them on board and help business or other businesses incorporate sustainability so they can improve their profit and their purpose.
Wow, that's fantastic. That's truly admirable. I feel like I admire the mission of like each of your projects, and they all sound like ideas that involve a lot of time and energy. I was actually wondering if you could go into more depth about Helios solutions as well.
Yeah. Santi, do you want to share this one?
Sure. Hi, John, and hi, everybody. So as John mentioned during his presentation, and just briefly, him and I met at the MIT boot camp. For those of you who don't know me, I am vision impaired, and I am also based in Brisbane, and my background is electrical engineering. Halo started because I have issues, and not just myself, but a lot of people who have vision impairment have issues catching public transport. And one of those issues stems from, if you can't see a bus approaching, you can't lift up your hand to hail it. So what ends up happening a lot of the times is that you stand at a bus stop, and you either stand with a cane or with your guide dog, and you hope and pray that the bus driver sees you and he stops. And it sometimes does happen, but a lot of the times they just go by because you're not hailing them. And it isn't their fault. It's just, if you see a person standing on the side of the road, not doing anything, it doesn't mean much sometimes. Because of that, and a few other issues with regards to finding the correct number, finding the right stop, when to get off, we decided to start Halo. And John and I and Amanda, which is another boot camper, we sort of met and we started discussions. Okay, what's the problem, and is there anything that we can do such that we can solve it, but also to develop a solution that not only benefits people who have a vision impairment, but also the general population. For the past 2 and a bit years, actually 3 years going on now, we have been developing a solution where a commuter feels comfortable to catch public transport because they can communicate their bus stop to the driver and where they would like to get off. And the driver gets that such that they don't need to worry about looking for people, and the person gets on the bus knowing that they're going to get off at the right stop. That's basically Halo. I'm sure I might be missing a few things here and there. And John, if you want to jump in and add a few things, by all means, please go ahead.
Yeah, look, I might jump in and just talk about one part to it. So the first part of Halo is solving the transportation problem for people with a vision disability. But very quickly looked at what we could actually do to take it beyond that. So the beachhead market, definitely people with a vision disability. But then we've explored right the way through to, in Australia, we have in rural areas, you have school buses that go around and basically collect everybody in a rural area and then take them to school. So then looking at ways they could use it in that area, or other countries where they don't actually have bus stops, so you can see what's going on. But the overall direction that Halo is taking is that is just the first problem we're going to solve. So we're looking at that becoming sort of Halo enabled, so that an organization will license that out from us and will become Halo enabled. And then we're going to tackle the next problem that people with a disability face. Now, there are so many problems out there, and we're looking at then, because we've got the money coming in for it, to be employing people with a disability to solve problems that they're facing, and then use that. So the overall, the business is Halo, and the transportation is just one of the problems that Halo has solved. So this is where we're looking at lots of or multiple individual niches that we can go for that have all got a relationship to one another.
Can I ask a question, or is someone in line?
Adriana, please go right ahead.
Hi, I'm Adriana. I have cerebral palsy. Helios sounds awesome. Oftentimes, as a wheelchair user, bus drivers don't want to stop either. So that would be really awesome for someone like myself to notify transportation. Hey, I'm at this bus stop or train stop. I've been wanting something like this, so this is awesome. Have you guys heard of Bindi Maps?
Good friends with the people pulled from Bindi Maps. So Bindi Maps are doing something where they can map inside a building like a shopping centre, for example, to help guide people around to work out where to go and where things are at.
I was on a panel with her, with the founder of Bindi Maps. Have you been involved with Remarkable Technologies? So you should definitely check them out because they exclusively focus on accessible technology. They're in Australia. I think they're in Sydney. So they are, I don't know if it's an incubator or accelerator, but specifically for assistive tech. And that's how I met Bindi Maps. The co-founder of Bindi Maps was through Remarkable Tech. So you should check them out.
Thank you, Adriana. That's a great idea. We're very keen to talk to you as well, just about how much further we could take Halo as well. So be keen to make contact afterwards.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Thank you so much, John and Adriana. I really like to see sort of those sorts of conversations that just sort of evolve naturally from our discussions. Now, one thing, John, that I wanted to ask about is, obviously you went to the boot camp. I was wondering if there were any sort of lessons or tools that you particularly found useful for what you've worked on since then.
For me, probably the biggest lesson there was actually defining the beachhead market. I've always been a scattergun approach where you try something, you just see where it sticks. So spending more time in that, the PMR and doing the research on your market, et cetera, to define your beachhead market really is a critical step to make sure things have got a chance of moving forward.
That's a great answer. There's no amount of things I think I don't continue to revisit from that experience. Was there anything in particular, Jonathan, that you were really driven to go to the boot camp experience for?
I was going partly to re-energize myself, come out of the other side of sort of working for several years without earning any income and supporting a whole lot of people. So I was going back to be re-inspired and re-energized and just becoming part of the network of people all around the world that are focusing on different things was phenomenal. So I was over the moon at how well it went and how many people I was able to connect with. And yeah, I can see a number of the names here I'm still in contact with. So thank you all. It's great to see the journeys you're still on.
Israel, I've noticed that you've unmuted yourself. Did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, I do. Thanks for such a insightful presentation, John. It's a real pleasure to see you since our bootcamp. I'm puzzled though about one phrase that you mentioned. I guess it's on the first slide and it goes something like this. When there are many ways of passing a problem, it doesn't matter the one you take. Can you elaborate on that? Maybe mentioning an example where this really worked for you?
I'll actually start from more of a personal story. And guess what made that real for me was outside of business. And then I'll sort of share the business perspective to it. At the same time as I was starting my business, we were also having kids. So it's a pretty challenging time in our life. Having kids is something that people are very passionate about and have got some incredibly strong opinions for. So we had one side of the market that was saying, breast is best, you must breastfeed your child. If you don't breastfeed your child, then you are a bad mother, a bad parent, everything else. And we then had other people saying, well, actually what's best is whatever works for you and is best looks after the health of your baby. We had several issues with breastfeeding. We had an absolutely miserable child for the first 6 weeks of her life trying to feed her breast milk. But we'd been so indoctrinated that was what we had to do. We kept on persisting. The moment we changed over to bottle feed, our lives changed. Now, that's, I guess, one example of, how different opinions work out, what works for you. From a business perspective, I guess the example there is an inch wide, a mile deep. So many business consultants so many business advisors that you speak to, they're saying, yep, definitely an inch wide, a mile deep. Be really good at what you do. Don't do anything else. Don't distract yourself. And yet what we've seen out there is that the market shifts, something happens, and that niche can very, very quickly dry up. There are other opinions out there that maybe just going for the niche isn't the right approach. So we've then looked at what are the other ways that you could do things. And that's where we're now doing a multiple niche type approach where they're all at different stages of development.
Yeah, that was a great question. Thanks so much, Israel. I was actually wondering, Jonathan, if you could sort of describe the relationship between Australian Passive House Association and your companies. I did a little bit of reading about it, but I feel like it would be better to just kind of hear it from you.
So passive house as a concept is really about making your buildings as sort of thermally isolated as an esky. So what you're trying to do there is to make sure that if it's really hot outside, that doesn't get in, or if it's really cold outside, that doesn't get in. Now, we've seen elements of that adopted in the construction code where buildings are being insulated and made airtight, but what hasn't changed in the code is the ventilation requirements. So we're now having buildings that are brand new buildings that within 6 months they're not actually fit to occupy, even though they've been built to all the different codes. And it's because you get interstitial condensation, you get mold, moisture problems, a whole range of things. So Passive House Association is actually basically it's a non-profit organisation that is empowering its members to know what passive house is, how to do it properly, and we were involved in developing and basically getting that underway. Our business side, Viridis, is about helping people have better buildings. Now, while we don't do much in the residential home type space, we do work in the commercial market. So we can use the knowledge and the skills and how passive house works and apply them across to the commercial industry. So we don't actually do passive house design at the moment, but we take on some of the lessons from that and use that to improve the market.
That's awesome. I imagine there's a huge number of very interesting lessons that you have learnt there that you can take away to do other things. One thing I was sort of super interested about from what you've been talking about is you've been saying how inch wide but a mile deep as a concept, but you've expressed quite interestingly the perspective going for multiple niches. Or how do you get to the point when you're sort of comfortable in a space enough to start dividing your attention? Like how do you know when you're ready, sort of thing, if that makes sense?
So I guess that's probably one of the advantages of running a business with a team is that I don't have to do everything. So on Viridis, for example, when we were sort of going through and recovering from the collapse, we focused on just one part of the business. And at one point, that was just the laboratory. And then as the laboratory was getting on its feet, I was starting to get back into the sustainable building side of things and slowly built up a team. So each one had a chance to get further depth and progress. So each parts of the business are at actually different stages of evolution and market maturity. Sanji and I have got the same approach with Halo in that overall our vision is to go for multiple niches. But right now, the only one we're actually spending real time on is on resolving the transportation problem. We've got ideas as to what the next lot of niches will be. We won't be properly activating those and sort of engaging people to work on them until we've got the transportation one under control and earning money, or we've worked out that it's just not possible and we have to do something different. So overall, you have to have money coming in that can pay people to do what needs to be done before I can spend my time on other areas.
That makes complete sense. I don't know, Jonathan, if you can see the questions and discussion channel under Saturday discussions. There are some comments there for you. Rachel, did you want to read yours aloud at all, or it's up to you?
I don't know if I can read it because I'm now on this other screen, but I just wanted to pop in with audio and say quick hi to John and really express my appreciation for your presentation. I particularly like the simplicity of your slides, the wholeheartedness with which you told your story, which is a story of great vulnerability and courage. I really appreciate that. And to say hi also, I don't know whether you remember, we met very briefly back in April 2018.
Yeah, thank you for coming to meet us. I really appreciate that. So it's good to see you then.
One thing I mentioned in the chat, I can't really read it. I was really appreciating the story of Halo and how your beachhead market extended beyond the primary aim, because I think when there's a service or a product that is so brilliant that it can actually sort of permeate into other markets, it reminded me of one of the case studies that we were given during our bootcamp class 3, which is about these timepieces, which were originally designed for a visually impaired group. But then because through the market research and the actual user experience, they discovered that in fact, these customers who were wearing timepieces were very keen on having objects that were beautiful and trendy. So it turned out that then in refining their product, ultimately these watches, which were then called timepieces, were very attractive to much wider audience of also people who did not have issues in reading the time, but there was this discovery that you could actually wear a watch that you could feel the time on, even if you weren't visually impaired, which opened up, new sorts of possibilities. So you could be in a meeting and you could be touching your watch without anybody really noticing, telling the time. So that was I was inspired, to think back on that, listening to your story about Hayden. Just wanted to say, I'm really, really happy to have been able to listen, and thank you so much.
Yeah, those E1 watches are something special. So it was actually good to see one on Santi's wrist to see how he was actually using it. And yeah, actually jealous that he had a better watch than I did.
I actually got myself one that year as my Christmas present to myself. I got a E1 timepiece, and I still wear it today.
Lovely.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Rachel. You've definitely been through quite a bit, Jonathan. It's truly amazing, emerged from it. And I was wondering what you envision, sort of the future looking like for you, and also for the companies that you've started.
I still need to put quite a lot more time in the companies. I mean, Viridis is very much moving more into supporting other businesses on their sustainability journey, because we need the businesses to take action to make things happen, and we've got a way to show that. So I am looking at making sure that continues, but then for somebody else to start taking on more of the role and the expertise on that, because my focus is to try and get the Helios side of things. So that's where I'm, I guess, most excited and passionate about, but at the moment I'm spending the least amount of time on. So that's where I really see we can make some more things happen. At the moment, I find it easy to try and introduce people into sustainability and to get them to be a recognised name in the industry. So I'm really enjoying that part of Viridis, but I've got no real connection on the Halo side of things, and keen to see where that could go.
Very exciting. I look forward to hearing how things go. Maybe if you're available, we'll be able to have you again, say a year or something, and see how things have changed then.
Look, I think you need to get Santi for that one. He's a much more eloquent speaker than I am. So happy to sit and listen to him.
Sounds like a plan, but I think you're an excellent speaker. Now, one thing that we tend to like to wrap up these discussions with is sort of a best lesson, words of wisdom question, where if you are comfortable sharing a lesson that you have found to be the best lesson in your entrepreneurial journey, or a set of small lessons, whatever sort of feels free to you. So feel free to take it very open-ended, how you think it would be best to share.
The best lesson is really coming back to the first slide. Give yourself a death date. Assign what that is. You don't need to necessarily tell anybody, but have it pretty clear in your head that that's the day or that's the year that you're not going to live beyond. Now, you can change that year every few years, but for me, it's always been about 10 years away, because that means I don't lose sight. I don't sort of leave that bucket list of things to do for another day. I keep on taking them and doing parts of them. I'm still working towards a future. And to me, that's quite while it does make some difficulties. Telling your wife that you might only live for another 10 years and let's have kids is pretty challenging. It does actually empower you to then make the most of what you've got and work for something for them in the future.
That's amazing. Rachel just said it well. She said, wow, that is such a bold attitude. I think it is, but it's such an amazing way to like set yourself aflame in a way. I feel like, giving yourself a death date is a little bit dark. I love that you took this as an opportunity to form this perspective, this sense of urgency to make the most of your life, not just for yourself, but for others. I really appreciate that. So I take that advice to heart. Thank you so much, Jonathan. We really appreciate all of your thoughts and everything you took the time to teach us today. And thank you to everyone who made the time to join today, even though we held the discussion at a different time. We really appreciate you bringing your perspective and energy to today's discussion. Spencer and I feel really fortunate to be part of this community and for the opportunity to bring this cooperative learning experience to you each week. We're always open to your ideas on how we can make it better. We definitely hope to have other co-working opportunities in the future. And I definitely want to thank Santi too. Thank you so much, Santi, for sharing with us today as Jonathan's co-founder of Halo, and also for helping him get on Discord. Thank you so much.
That's okay. I'm happy to.
We hope you both have a great day and everyone else has a great day and evening ahead.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
You've just finished another episode of Founders Voyage, the podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. The team at Founders Voyage wants to thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We hope you enjoyed your time with us, and if so, please share this with someone else who might enjoy this podcast. You can also support us by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and by donating to our Patreon. Outro music today is Something for Nothing by Reverend Peyton's Big Damn Band.